let's just jump right into this, shall we? Welcome to today's Explainer, where we're basically pulling back the curtain on the highly calculated corporate strategies that are, quite frankly, driving the global obesity epidemic. You know that feeling when you polish off an entire family-sized bag of chips when you really only meant to have a handful? You probably beat yourself up over it, right? But what if I told you that behavior is exactly what that product was designed to do? Today, we're diving deep into the meticulous science, the hidden marketing, and the massive regulatory battles going on right now around ultra-processed foods.
To really understand what's at stake here, we have to look at the human reality. Take Rebecca, for example. She's a patient at the obesity clinic of Lausanne University Hospital, and she's been battling binge eating for 20 years. When they asked her if it's possible to just stop eating, her response was honestly devastating. She said, "I don't stop until I have to, physically, when the stomach ache is so bad that I can't sit or lie down." For folks like Rebecca, food becomes this refuge for emotional stress. It starts with the pleasure of those first few bites, but it ends in intense physical pain and, well, profound shame.
So it begs the million-dollar question, doesn't it? Why is it just so incredibly hard to stop eating highly processed food? Is this really just a personal failure of willpower? Or is it the result of something deliberately designed? Well, the source material points out that our immediate environment has changed so drastically that medical professionals are literally calling it obesogenic or toxic. And to understand why it's so toxic, we need to take a look inside the laboratories of the food industry. Inside those labs, investigative journalist Michael Moss found what he calls the unholy trinity. We're talking about the 3 core ingredients that food engineers absolutely obsess over to make their products irresistible. First up, you've got salt. Industry insiders actually call this the flavor burst because it sits right on the surface of a snack, and it's the very first thing that hits your tongue. Then there's fat, which gives them that crucial mouthfeel. You know, that incredibly comforting sensation of biting into a warm, gooey grilled cheese sandwich? And finally, sugar, which just taps directly into a deeply wired, powerful human instinct. Which brings us to a heavily guarded industry secret known as the bliss point. Food scientists aren't just, tossing sugar, salt, and fat into a vat and crossing their fingers. No, they meticulously calibrate these foods. The bliss point is the exact, perfectly engineered amount of sugar, salt, and fat in a product. Not too little, not too much. It's designed to absolutely maximize the product's allure. It basically creates these intense cravings without ever actually making you feel full. Ultra-processed foods are built to deliver massive hits of calories while completely bypassing your body's natural signals that tell you to stop eating. Now, there's a pretty stark contrast between how the industry talks about this and what's actually happening in your brain. Food engineers use this very sanitized jargon, right? They talk about designing for craveability and moorishness, basically engineering a product to make us want more and more of it. They completely avoid the word addictive. But the neurobiological reality, it tells a totally different story. Researchers at Lausanne University Hospital found that the brain changes in someone who can't control their intake of fatty and sugary foods are actually comparable to the changes you see with excessive use of alcohol, tobacco, or even cocaine. I mean, lab experiments have shown rats will frantically press a lever for a hit of sugar. And get this, given the choice, they actually prefer the sugar over cocaine. That fact alone raises a massive question. Are manufacturers deliberately targeting vulnerable consumers? I mean, if the entire business model relies on people eating way past the point of being full, who exactly are they relying on to buy all these products? Well, within the food industry, there is a very specific demographic they refer to internally as heavy users. These are vulnerable people who, for whatever reason, are highly prone to overeating processed products. And the industry actively targets them through their marketing. Michael Moss argues that, if we define addiction as a repetitive behavior that people find difficult to quit, then that absolutely 100% defines the business model of the processed food industry. Financially, the whole thing runs on the 80-20 rule. The industry knows that 20% of their customers are going to be eating 80% of a given product. Let that sink in for a second. That means their massive corporate profits fundamentally rely on a very small group of people eating a whole lot of their food. So if a corporation hyper-focuses its marketing on that 20%, those heavy users, they are going to absolutely maximize their sales. So you have to wonder, have the leaders of these massive corporations actually been aware of the damage they're causing? Well, back on April 8th, 1999, there was this secret meeting in Minneapolis with the CEOs of the 8 biggest food companies in the US. Michael Mudd, who was an executive VP at Kraft, stood up and laid it all out. He pointed to the growing data linking their products to weight gain, diabetes, and cancer, and he said, We cannot pretend food isn't part of the obesity problem. The one thing we shouldn't do is nothing. And how did the room react? Another executive stood up, visibly angry, and flat out said there was no way they were going to mess around with the company jewels, meaning the salt, sugar, and fat, if it was going to hurt sales. The meeting ended right there. They saw absolutely no incentive to change.
Fast forward all the way to 2021, and the internal reality is still just as shocking. The Financial Times published a leaked presentation from Nestle, literally the world's largest food manufacturer, revealing that over 60% of its mainstream food and drinks portfolio didn't even meet a recognized definition of health, and that is excluding things like coffee and baby formula. The company itself admitted internally that the vast majority of their products were straight up unhealthy. To really see the real-world impact of all these engineered cravings, we just have to look at Mexico's obesity epidemic. In 1980, just under 7% of the Mexican population was obese, but then in 1994, NAFTA was signed, which totally deregulated the market. This essentially flooded Mexico with incredibly cheap, ultra-processed food and sugary drinks. Today, the results are just catastrophic. Over 75% of adults in Mexico are now classified as overweight or obese. The average person there consumes 163 liters of soda a year, and poor nutrition is now responsible for about a third of all deaths in the country. But Mexico didn't take this lying down. The government launched some seriously aggressive, essential regulations to fight back. They slapped a national tax on sugary drinks. They banned all those friendly animal mascots, the cartoon tigers and toucans, from children's cereal boxes to stop them from targeting kids. And crucially, they mandated these massive black warning labels, kind of like what you'd see on a pack of cigarettes, explicitly calling out if a product has excess sugar, saturated fat, or salt. And if you want proof of how effective that kind of government regulation can be, just look at identical products across different borders. Take a regular bottle of Fanta. In the UK, where the government actually implemented a special tax on sugary drinks, the manufacturer reformulated it, dropping the sugar to 4.6 grams per deciliter. But over in Switzerland, where there's no sugar tax and intense industry lobbying keeps the market unregulated, that exact same drink has 10.3 grams of sugar. It's more than double. It just proves that food corporations will really only reduce sugar and protect consumers when the law actively forces them to.
So how does the food industry react to these life-saving regulations?
Shockingly, they fight them. In an internal memo pushing back against Mexico's labeling laws, Nestlé claimed the proposal lacked scientific rationale. They actually wrote, and I quote, "The warning messages are susceptible of creating unnecessary fear in consumers." Internal emails even showed Nestlé going to the Swiss government, asking officials to step in and oppose Mexico's public health laws on their behalf. They use delay tactics, they argue that labels ruin consumer choice, and they try to block health requirements at every single turn just to protect those profit margins. Which leaves us with a pretty profound and frankly unsettling realization. Our eating behaviors are largely locked in during early childhood, usually before we even turn 10. Pediatricians are seeing kids today who are massively overweight, growing up in a world that aggressively markets ultra-processed, bliss point engineered foods directly at them. So we really have to ask ourselves, are we actually willing to sacrifice one, maybe two future generations to the food industry? Should corporate profits continue to override the health and futures of our children? It is definitely something to chew on the next time you're walking down the grocery aisle. Thanks for tuning into this explainer. I really hope it helps you look at those supermarket shelves just a little bit differently next time.